are back on our EPS happy hours. I get to be a fanboy today. This perch has allowed me to contact some people I've seen and admired online for a long time, and one of them is Megan Starr with her incredible blog on Eastern Europe and the Nordics. Welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm very flattered.
Well, let's pop right into one of my extreme favorites, Faroe Islands.
Mhm.
You've got the best posts on the internet about the Faroes that I've seen. So talk about them as a destination.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's my absolute, I think, probably favorite place to write about, to take pictures of, to go to. I've only been twice, but I'm hoping to head back there. Just remarkable. I don't know if anybody here's been there. Please chime in and let me know what your favorite place was. It's just incredible. I've just never seen so much dropping scenery like in one place, and it literally never lets up. There is not an ugly inch of any island there. I'm just, it leaves me speechless. And I think like when I talk to people about it, I can't really even express it. Like I just have to say, just look up photos of it, just Google it, and then they usually get what I'm talking about pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's yeah, just thinking of these waterfalls crashing down the sheer cliffs into the Atlantic Ocean, and that it's yeah, what yeah, how do you
Yeah.
find the analogy or comparison? It's like a greener Iceland and maybe cooler. You can offend somebody or something. It's yeah, it's such a incredible bracing mix. And I think you told me that the upcoming
Yeah.
James Bond movie is going to have a scene there. So it's going to
Yeah.
be like what's Skellig Michael in Ireland. It's going to be overrun and when tourism
Yeah,
opens
that's
up.
what I'm nervous about, especially because the place that it's actually filmed there, you can only get there by this really small ferry. And I mean, there's like one lane tunnels on this island, so it really cannot handle a whole lot of people. So I'll be really interesting to see what happens tourism wise, because I know it's going to lure people out there for sure.
And any tips for how to manage the costs in Faroe Islands? Because that is the constant theme. Is I think I was there I think it was in October, November. So a lot of the B&Bs or these were just totally closed for the season. And there was one sort of hostel that was open on the same grounds as a hotel. And even that was like 80 or 100 US a night. It was totally empty except for me and one other guy. And they put us in the same room. It's like
Oh my
you couldn't
gosh.
you just couldn't give us a private room.
Yeah, no, I to be honest, like the first time I went there, it was I don't even remember how many days I went for, maybe 5. It wasn't too unaffordable. Ended up crashing the car in a tunnel, so that became the biggest expense of all of it. But the second trip I was working actually with the tourism board, so everything was covered. But I got to see some different islands that I hadn't seen in the past. So I guess to keep it cheap, if you're into camping, there are some camping spots. It is not legal to wild camp, however. And there's some B&Bs around. I went to a really nice one. Uh, hey, go Steelers. I don't know who wrote that, but
Tammy King.
oh, I've got a Steelers bear behind me, but he's kind of like against another
Oh
thing, so I
wow.
can't see it.
Those are
Yeah,
sharp eyes. Yeah.
yeah, along with that beautiful picture. But yeah, so it's I mean, there's ways to keep it cheap there, but you definitely need to be flexible because like you need to have at least a little bit of money set aside just in case things do not go as planned. The weather there is not the most cooperative, to be honest. So I'm not sure I'd want to pitch a tent anywhere there. Just my own opinion, but yeah.
I think you want to be a group or a very heavy person in case you just get blown off the island in your
Yeah,
tent. I'd be
yeah.
pretty worried. I'd fill my pockets with sand perhaps to
Hmm.
feel a little bit better.
Oh, it's so windy there. Yeah.
The let's stay in the Nordic region.
Mhm.
You've got so many posts. Know you speak Norwegian. Pick out some of the highlights because it's another, as a broad region, I think it's a similar trade-off for travelers of there's so much they want to see, but
Yeah.
costs always come up as this big thing. I've heard people argue like Norway, get a discounted cruise and see the fjords that way because overland is going to just cost astronomically. But I don't,
Yeah.
I'm not an expert.
It is the most expensive place. I mean, I lived there for 4 years, so like I don't. actually look at it that way because I know to go to the grocery store instead of the gas station or a restaurant. Yeah, I guess some quick tips there is go to the places that other people don't go to. Everywhere is beautiful, so you're not going to worry about it being pretty. Shop at the grocery stores, don't eat at restaurants, and you can go wild camping there. So the weather also sucks, but for the most part, like you can go pitch a tent anywhere in the country, and you don't have to worry about getting in trouble for it. So you can save some money in certain ways, but then in other ways, you're just going to go broke. But I would say like the Arctic is kind of the hot spot right now. In the last like 2 winters, Tromsø is really overcrowded, so there's actually some better alternatives, in my opinion. If you go a little further north or a little further south to like the Lofoten Islands in winter, they're a bit crowded in the summer, but in winter there's not usually a whole lot of people there, so it's pretty nice. Yeah.
I spent an evening after many hours of flight delays from Svalbard. I spent an evening, and I'm from Minnesota, so I can handle cold, but I spent an evening standing at a dim sky in Tromsø, and I said, never again am I going to chase the northern lights. I hate this. And I've never managed to see them other than like, somebody shows, oh, on the camera, it looks like there's a little bit of green. So
Yeah.
disabuse me of that. And what's the best place? Tromsø is one that comes up. But if you're really determined to see them.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, like I saw them every time I tried in Tromsø. But I also saw them in the Lofoten Islands, and a lot of people will speculate and say, "Oh no, the weather's too temperamental there, or this or that." But if you're with the right guide, if you take like an actual tour, and you're with the
Mhm.
right guide, they'll know the places where things blow over quickly, and you have a really good chance to actually see them, no matter what people say. Yeah, I mean, I've been to the Lofoten Islands a couple times. Well, one was in summer, so it didn't really count. But I don't think that you'll have problem there if you have the money and the time to spend to kind of venture out a little. Also, northern Finland is really good. So the weather there is pretty. It's kind of like Tromsø's. There's not a whole lot moving through, in my opinion, and I saw them there without any problem as well. So I think if you're looking for two spots, like for the best chance, I would say Tromsø, even though it's going to be really packed in winter. Maybe go in the shoulder season when it's actually better to see the northern lights, or northern Finland.
Yeah, that sounds like yeah, because I realized I had gone in not knowing that much, and I show up in
Yeah.
Svalbard. It wasn't my purpose to be in Svalbard, but I did book. I mean, they have this sort of the government organizes a few operators through a
Yeah.
central thing for these outings, and I booked all these, and then they I get there and they say, yeah, we're too far north to see them all that often, but maybe you'll get lucky and realize
Did you
it's
see
not
them
about
there?
going north. Hmm?
Did you see them in Svalbard?
No, no.
Okay,
I've
yeah,
I've
yeah, I
struck
know.
out. I've sort of seen them from the airplane once or twice. I've been in Fairbanks, Alaska, when it's just poured rain nonstop. Yeah, instead of seeing them, so I'm not. As I said, I've given up on pursuing them. Speaking of
Yeah.
difficulty, Baha in the comments, he's asking, "What's the most challenging visa for you?"
Oh, it shouldn't have been challenging, but back in the day, Belarus, or I should say Germany, because they've never given me a visa really to live there. So, but no,
Mhm.
in reality, like traveling, it was Belarus back in the day. It was far before like 2011, before they were getting any tourism. And I got my visa there. I thought everything was great. Like I had, worked my butt off. I actually went somewhere to get the visa, another country to get the visa, because I was living in Oslo. And I go to board the plane there, and I have a layover in Moscow. Well, I didn't know at the time Moscow considered Belarus to be domestic territory, any flights out of the airport there. So they didn't even let me board the flight to Moscow from Oslo to Belarus because I would have had to switch in the airport and I didn't have a Russian transit visa. So I had to axe that whole trip, lost tons of money, and ended up going the next year. I had to go wait for 10 days in Latvia. Yeah, I think, yeah, in Riga to get that visa again. And then they sent it in the mail and it arrived one day prior to my trip, to my new trip to
Oh.
Belarus. So now you don't need a visa there. But yeah, at the time it was kind of painstaking, but it was worth every penny that I spent and every effort that I put into that.
Let's speak about Belarus as a destination. As you
Yeah.
said, it's setting aside COVID stuff, it's recently become easier for a number of nationalities,
Mhm.
but that doesn't mean it's opening up as a country. So those interested in a very different, what you might say, a throwback system, have a window into Belarus.
And it's funny because I haven't been there since they started allowing tourism in there. So I don't know what it's actually like. I know what it was like prior to the visa
Mhm.
free. Nowadays, from what I hear from people, it doesn't seem like the Belarus I knew. Positively, I mean, I loved the Belarus I went to from a tourist standpoint. It was so different, but it was really closed off. A lot of like people talking secretly. I'd met some guy who ran the hostel I stayed at who had actually been put in jail right after I left, and he had been in jail before for protesting the government. He's a musician now. I think he lives in Poland actually. But yeah, there were a lot of problems there, a lot of human rights issues, which still exist. But it seems as though, like, now that they're allowing tourism in there, there's a little bit of a different face to the country. I haven't been back. I've been twice, but it was all prior to that. So I'm curious to go back actually.
You mentioned Soviet architecture, so talk about some of your favorite spots for the enthusiasts.
Yeah, I love Armenia for it actually. So, I mean, I don't know if I mentioned it, but it's really late here. Sorry, guys, and I'm usually in bed by now. But Armenia is where I'm living right now, and where I'm based part time. So, yeah, I mean, here you still have a lot of it. You don't really have the Lenin statues, although I just did explore the very first Lenin statue ever in Vanadzor. It's in like a random, like privately owned
Hmm.
Soviet camp park there that a family runs.
Hmm.
But it is apparently it is the original. So you don't really see those around, but the architecture is still here for the most part and hasn't really been kind of like I don't know, put down. I would say also I really like Ukraine, but obviously they're decommunizing, so things are kind of a little bit more endangered there. But if you want to go somewhere for Soviet architecture where they haven't really messed with it too much, I would definitely say go to Kyrgyzstan. Any town that had a Lenin statue probably
Hmm.
still has it.
Hmm.
So they haven't really made much of an attempt to move things too much, and you can see some really, really awesome pieces of architecture there. But I would say my favorite here is here in Armenia because I know where it is, and my business partner, he is actually from here, so he's able to communicate and find out places that the average traveler would not be able to find. So we explore some really cool stuff here.
And I've shared the link of your new venture in Armenia, and I guess that means that Armenia is not just old churches, huh?
It's not, and I'm seeing so many good questions. 2 days is not enough to spend in Yerevan, and it is really, really safe here. They always say it's one of the safest places to travel. But you can do 2 days in Yerevan and see a lot. Yeah, I went to the Belarus tournament, the hockey tournament as well. That was the second time I went, and I
Oh,
didn't
did you?
need a visa. Yeah, I actually I had to buy a fake ticket. I mean, it was a real ticket to a hockey game, but I didn't go. Sorry if any Canadians heard that, but I didn't go. I just got rid of the ticket and just hung out with people and partied for a couple of days.
And
Um,
Deb Jeet's asking your secret favorites in the Caucasus.
well, I really enjoyed my trip to Abkhazia years ago. I can't fathom it's changed much, so I'm sure it's exactly as I left it many years ago.
Well,
It was
expand on
interesting.
that because that ties into, I guess, the visa question of maybe the visa you might have regretted writing about.
Yeah, it's but hey, I got a lot of traffic from that back in the day before everybody else decided to rewrite the same post that they used mine to go there. But it's
Oh, geez.
okay. Yeah, a lot of people like rewrote it and I'm like, I got you in there. I got you, through the border. But then but it's fine. I keep it up to date because I actually speak with the government officials there to know what the border restrictions are and what's going on. Um, yeah, I would say my secret favorites in the Caucasus. Oh my gosh, we just got back on a trip through the Lori region of Armenia. So we hit up like Vanadzor and Ijevan Tavush, but we were crossed over there as well. And we got to see some really, really interesting places. And it's funny because as much as I love Soviet architecture, I'm finding that because I'm promoting tourism in Armenia, I'm drawn to a little bit of everything here, not just Soviet architecture. So I um, really am taken aback by like awesome nature and awesome like villages, things that I normally wouldn't be drawn to. I find the beauty in them here because I know that I want to promote tourism here to everybody, not just a spiritual traveler or an adventure traveler. So we went to Odzun Village, actually, up near the border of Georgia, and it was just absolutely outstanding. I mean, it was just really beautiful. We had an awesome B&B there. Um, the scenery of the canyon and stuff just outstanding. So I would say that's kind of one of my new favorite secret places in the Caucasus. And yes, Brunos is really good. Whoever wrote that, it's one thing I miss from Norway, actually.
Talk, yeah, and there was about a brown cheese. Some of the comments, their heads are still in Norway, and
Yeah,
we've shuttled across Europe. Armenia is one that it struck me in my planning. I'm very systematic that
yeah,
it's more of a hub and spoke transport network than
yeah,
say that fits a circuit. So I felt like I was going back and forth to Yerevan quite a bit. I was packing in a lot and in a
yeah,
shorter visit. But to talk about that, which of the spokes, so to speak, to prioritize? I particularly enjoyed Eshmirtsin more than
yeah,
because it's an active church center rather than some of the
yeah.
ancient abandoned churches. But talk about putting together again. You're American. A week is at most of us could possibly dedicate. So think about it that
Yeah.
way.
Well, it's really funny because we were sitting here brainstorming earlier. We're trying to make up like Armenia itineraries, and it's just really a challenging thing because of exactly like what you said. So we're trying to do kind of like three separate ones. One that's going to target like more spiritual person who is into monasteries, but then a little bit of culture as well. Somebody who's into adventure and nature, and then something that's going to be a mixture. It is really difficult though. They've repaired the roads here, or they're in the process of a lot of it. So that really is helping. There's still a lot of construction up near Oliverdi that is newer, but I think it'll be finished soon. It's difficult. I mean, like you said, public transportation in this country is just, it's lagging. And it's hard to go anywhere without being based in Yerevan. So we're trying to figure out other like epicenters that people can base themselves and still have an awesome trip. Gyumri is really up and coming. It's the second city here, and they're doing discount flights there, even though it's rumored that they may not have them because of everything going on.
Yeah.
And then Vanadzor, we just got back from, which is, if you love Soviet architecture, it's a really great place to go. But it is also a place that has enough transportation that could help you get around the region pretty well. So we're kind of trying to figure that out ourselves a bit. My partner is Armenian, so he's able to do things at the drop of a hat and figure it all out. But we also have to, put our mindset into, okay, how would the average tourist do this? That's actually why we started the Armenia site, is because there's no information out there in English. And we need to try to give people instructions on how to get from point A to point B. And quite frankly, we don't usually even know ourselves. We have to test everything out. So it's harder for us to build content on this website right now than any other niche website out there, because we actually don't have the information ourselves. We have to try it and do it ourselves. There is no information out there right now. So that's why it's a little bit of a slow mover, but we're trying to get it there. I don't know if that really answered the question, but yeah, it's
No,
in
it's
some of,
excellent. Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
I didn't assume that there was a magic answer.
yeah,
I haven't been there in a decade, but I struggled with that. Of again, there's n number of day trips, and they're all a long day trip, and
yeah.
connecting the dots on the back door didn't always add up. Devjit's asking. He says Armenia seems to be lagging behind Georgia when it comes to attracting tourists. Why do you think this is the case? And how can this be rectified?
Mhm.
He needs to be hired by every tourism destination DMO in the world. But he says,
True.
given the astonishing offerings of the country, and he follows up with his love of the Lori region that you mentioned.
It's so beautiful. Yeah, I think like, and he's hit the nail on the head. I mean, it is lagging behind. I think a lot of it has to do, in my opinion, with the past government here. And they had, if anybody is not aware of this, they had a revolution in 2018 here, and it was a peaceful revolution, which in this part of the world is quite astonishing. So it was really remarkable. But they ended up overthrowing their crappy, corrupt, I could say a lot of other words, government,
Mm,
and electing a anti-corruption journalist into office. There's, people, it's controversial whether people think he's doing a good job or not, but in my opinion, I've seen insane progress in this country just in those 2 years. I was here during the revolution, and I've seen, I mean, just the amount of businesses popping open here is hopeful for me, because before, I mean, I came here and I took a 5 year gap of coming here and nothing had changed when I got here. It was like the
Hmm.
same thing. It was all outdated. Nowadays, though, there's always something to be excited about, and people are listening. So if you want to, you know, one thing I like about being here is if I really wanted to reach the prime minister with something, I could find a way to do it. People here do have more of a voice because there's not many people living here. So if you're active and you want to make changes in the country, it's a little bit easier to navigate up now than it would have used to been, and they are trying to listen. It's a long way to go, but I mean, hopefully we can see changes. I know, like, they have now, one of the big problems here was flights, getting flights into here, and affordable flights, if that. And now within the last year, or the last, yeah, within the last year, they've launched, I think, 12 discount flights here from Western Europe.
Hmm.
Granted, they were all supposed to start this year, and most of them didn't because of the virus. But that's 12 new routes that launched from mega cities in Europe, and that's a really great thing for Armenians to travel and people to travel here affordably. So hopefully, fingers crossed, like that's what we're hoping to do, is to boost tourism here and get it moving along and just bring awareness to the country outside of the Kardashians.
Yeah. I was gonna say I'm picturing like when you say these budget flights from Western Europe, I'm picturing Bratislava and all these shaved head British guys coming for cheap beer. And
Yeah.
it's I guess it's a mixed blessing, and that's one of the tongue-in-cheek comment from Mehul is, why do you want to make it so touristy like Georgia? It's a balance, but
It
I'm
is a
thinking, yeah,
balance. Yeah.
it's I mean, to hear that you said no progress for essentially 5 years, when you look at the success of the Armenian diaspora around the world, which is renowned, I mean, certainly in the U.S.
Yeah.
for such economic prowess. It's a strange disconnect of, I guess, how bad or ineffectual a government can be,
Yeah.
that hadn't translated into the kind of development that you're hoping to see.
Well, for me, it's like, it's not about the place becoming too touristy. It's never going to be too touristy because it's not located in a convenient region. Let's be honest. Like, it's got two closed borders, and the only open borders are Georgia and Iran, which I can't go do a road trip anywhere through this country to another border except Georgia. But you know, when I look and I see that the average salary here is like $300, for me, I'm happy to promote tourism and bring as many people here as possible, because it's only going to shift the economy in a positive direction rather than a negative one for right now. So I don't think over tourism is anything to worry about in the near future.
Yeah, it doesn't seem. Yeah, there's a long way to go, and I'm thinking in my visit there was a on one of the day tours I took was a man, Iranian American man, and
Yeah.
his whole purpose for the trip was just to get as close that he could see Iran, because he said in his lifetime he probably
Yeah.
won't make it anywhere closer than peering across
Yeah.
uh, from the border. So yeah, it's not necessarily the neighborhood where people will flood in, and it's actually, I mean, it's, you said geographically, I mean, it's pretty far. It's not, if you're taking that
Yeah.
Ryanair flight, it's not necessarily the
This is a
shortest
long
distance.
stag do location, everybody, just so you know. So it's not an easy hop over from London, but it's worth it. If it, I mean, if you get like a really long weekend or a week, it's a great location, and you can see quite a bit easily if you have the money to like rent a car or hire taxis.
And compare Georgian food and Armenian food. I love them both. I probably know more
Yeah.
about Georgian just because I want to get a heart attack, but
Yeah. For me, yeah, Georgian food is great when you're hungover, and Armenian food is good when you want to lose a little bit of weight. I don't know. I don't know if that really says, like, I guess it's what I prefer to eat in each culture. Here, I really just love like the salads and the freshness and the lightness of everything here. In Georgia, I enjoy the food because it's heavy. It's like I'm not supposed to be eating this, but I am.
mm,
And it sops up Georgian wine really well. So I like them both, but if I had to pick one, I would always probably pick Armenian food. But I have a different level of Armenian food here because I get to eat a lot of home cooked meals, which are sensational. So I have nothing to complain about.
What does a home cooked meal look like in Armenia?
Very brown. No, I'm just kidding. Some it's like very brown and then very colorful salads. There's no in between. It depends. I mean, like I would say my favorite dish here is something called sipas. It's a soup, and it's got like some type of like wheat. I don't know what it's actually called. Wheat in it, and it's like a yogurty milk soup.
Hmm.
It's and mint in it. It's so delicious. And I like in Etchmiansen they have a type of kufta there. It's like I don't tend to like meat that is what looks like it's processed, even if it's not processed. Like it just really grosses me out. But my partner Aram's mom makes this really good Etchmiansen kufta, and it's I don't even know how to explain it. Somebody on here mentioned Brunos. If you're Norwegian, if you know servalot pulsa, it's like a 500 times better version of that. It's I don't know how to explain it, but it's really delicious. It's a very special thing here though. And they make it from scratch.
Awesome. And talk about you've certainly raved about Armenia in your own lifestyle. For those that are looking for that digital nomad thing, talk about the accessibility and you also spend half a year in Frankfurt, Germany, as I understand. So
Yes.
different places you've based yourself. What are the ones for the location independent that you've experienced and you'd recommend?
I would say Frankfurt is definitely not a great place for location independent people because it's a bit expensive for a German city, and it's also not got that that hip vibe maybe that Berlin has or some of the other places. But I love Frankfurt for its own reasons. It has really good international food, and I miss it. And every time I go back there, I have a list of all the places I need to eat at right away. Um, when it comes to here in Yerevan, I actually think it's a really underrated digital nomad location. To be honest, I like Tbilisi just fine, but I mean it's just kind of been overrun by that. So I actually hope to see people moving down here in the near future. We have good Wi-Fi, although I was cutting out a little bit ago, but it seems like it's back. We have really good Wi-Fi here for the most part. There's a lot of opportunities to go out in nature. There's some cool guest houses. There's some really cool hikes if you're into that. It's easy. I find that here in Yerevan, especially, the people speak pretty good English. So it's not, you're not hard pressed to actually meet somebody. Although there's not a whole lot of foreigners here. There's a lot of diaspora here, but you don't see a lot of foreigners in general unless they're traveling through. But I find it a really convenient place. It's affordable if you don't mind not living in the city center. The city center is a bit pricey. That's where I live, and I find it's just slightly cheaper than Frankfurt where I live. So
Hmm.
it can be really expensive in the city center here.
Oh,
Yeah.
Devjit is still working on the tourism push for Armenia. So he's saying, how about
Yeah.
promoting Armenia to tourists not necessarily from the West?
Mhm.
India, for example, there is or was an Armenian community in India, and there are more recent historical ties from Soviet times.
Yeah, it's actually funny. That is one of our intentions there and Middle Eastern travelers, which it might not be necessarily somebody from the Middle East, but somebody living there. There's a lot of Filipinos that come here that are
Hmm.
based in Dubai, actually,
Oh,
and
wow.
some of the other Gulf countries. Yeah, yeah, a lot of them. They come here for visa runs and they really like it here. But it's really interesting that you say that because I had a friend who was visiting here last year, I think it was, and she's Indian. She's from Calcutta, and she was telling us about all of the Soviet history there. We were having dinner with her, and she was telling us all about it, and I actually didn't know that, which is really embarrassing. But it's really, really, really interesting. So there is a little bit of a connection with India and Armenia, but our Indians still need visas here, unfortunately. So I'm hoping that that loosens up and that we get a little bit more awareness in India about Armenia. But I think like most people I know, I just chatted with somebody earlier today who is Indian and who loved coming here, and he just said he absolutely loved it here. So I will do my best to continue that and hopefully find ways to target that market a little bit more.
Fantastic. Yeah, we've got Adam chiming in. He lives in Dubai, and he said the
Ah,
Filipinos are talking about their love for it. So
they
good.
do. Yeah, they really like it here. I don't know what it is. I've never actually spoken, but I would love to sit down with somebody sometime and ask like what's alluring here for somebody from the Philippines because they all seem to really like it here.
Hmm. and you could if you wanted ambassadors for the outside world, and you couldn't have better, more cheerful visitors to
Yeah.
the tourism reception.
And they come here for like I think longer stints because they're renewing visas for the Middle East. So they're usually here and they stay in like a hostel for like a month or so. I met somebody who was here for almost like 6 months while he was renewing all his paperwork. So they come here for a long duration of time, and I imagine that the hospitality here just can pull anybody in. It's so welcoming.
Well, pivot. I see George of Travel Blogger Buzz, one of your big fans, has popped up, and so
Yeah,
you've heard of some of us points travelers and points bloggers.
yeah,
What's
yeah.
your take on us?
I've never understood. I would love for somebody to tell me like how I originated in the points traveler community because I am the worst person with money and I don't like figure out like I go somewhere based on whatever's a cheap flight and I end up there and then I end up probably wasting a lot more money than I should. And I just would love to know how I ended up in that circle. Like I would love to know. This has been years, but it's really fascinating to me because I don't feel like I fit the mold, but something must have happened in there.
I think it's got to be George and his relentless promotion and linking to your
Well, thank
article,
you.
because it's rare for someone to that isn't writing about Hyatt footprints,
I
Hyatt
know.
stays.
I really appreciate it because it's gotten me a lot of like followers over the years, and I've made a lot of connections because of it. And I never really knew the association there because I always was like, I just feel like the total wrong person to like promote for that because of how bad I am with like with like that kind of stuff. Being conscious like when I travel about things like that, I'm so bad with it.
Yeah, yeah, but as I said, one of the standing jokes like George will make is finally when Hyatt announces that they're opening uh, the first hotel in their brands in a country that, oh, now it exists, we can all we can all visit because there
Yeah.
is a Hyatt.
Yeah.
Speak about blogging. Oh
Mhm.
yeah. So Nagorno-Karabakh, which is
Yeah.
renamed, rebranded, if you will. Question: have you visited, and what about it?
No, oh, I haven't visited yet. So I was waiting to go there until after I visited Azerbaijan, which I have since been to. I have no desire to go back. Sorry. So I'm definitely going to head there as soon as I can. My goal was to actually head there this trip, but this trip has definitely not gone according to plan because I ended up in lockdown here. So I'm still planning to go there, but they're actually in lockdown there. They're not allowing anybody in until I think like June 15th, but it'll probably get extended. So yeah, as soon as I can go there, I would love to go. I hear it's just remarkable and the nature is just out of this world. So stand by for that. I hope that I can get there in this trip, if not the next one.
Looking forward to that. And we mentioned a bit about your experience in Abkhazia,
Yeah.
and I wanted to expand on that because you wrote about how to get the visa, and then and I asked before if it was okay to talk a bit about your experience
Yeah.
of blogging as a woman, which is I have a little bit of insight just from talking to bloggers such as yourself, and it's often horrifying and shocking of what you all deal with online that I'm oblivious to normally. So take it from there.
Yeah, it's well, I went there many years ago and I wrote about it really quickly actually because I gotten a lot of people on Twitter saying, "Oh, can you write the visa process here and tell us how to go there?" So I did. And then I ended up really like almost instantaneously on a lot of media outlets in Turkey, in Armenia, Georgia, I think Azerbaijan because they banned me for 5 years after that. It's a whole long thing. But yeah, so I ended up in all these news outlets because of this trip, because nobody went there, let alone a solo female. And I started getting a ton of like traffic to this post and a lot of messages basically condemning me from Georgian. It was always men. It was never, I don't remember ever getting one from a female until many years later, which is a whole nother story. But I just got a lot of hate mail from these guys. I mean, just telling me to die, go hang myself, get raped. I hope you die tonight. Why would you go there? You should have died. They should have shot you. Like all kinds of nonsense. And I have pretty thick skin when it comes to that kind of stuff because I'm usually quick witted and I can shoot something back or just ignore it. but it did get old after a while to the point where it actually tainted me from wanting to visit Georgia again. And it took me 5 years to go back to Georgia just because of that, just because I just didn't care enough to, it didn't
Mhm.
bother me, but I also just was like, ugh, it's kind of nasty things to say to somebody, especially because I didn't write anything politicizing the situation. I just kind of wrote, here's how you get a visa if you want to go. Just tell people what they want to hear, kind of thing. Like, don't say it's its own country to this person. You know, don't act like it's not to this person. Yeah, and I ended up, I don't get it anymore though, but I did get banned from working with a hotel there. They wanted to work with me, and we're so excited. This was last year, or no, I think October 2018. They wanted to work with me and all this stuff, and they like invited me up there from Armenia, and then they like went through my blog and go, actually, we can't work with you anymore. You give Abkhazia its own category on your blog, and it should fall under Georgia. I was like, dude, I've got Svalbard up there and in the Faroe Islands. I was like, it's just, it is what it is. And then I just said, I don't really want to work with you guys anyway. But it's a really like well-known hotel in Tbilisi. So yeah, but all is good. I don't get the mail anymore for the most part.
Oh, that's good. And
Mhm.
generally otherwise, but how do you interact with your readership? I think you're more website centric than say a lot of people now
Yeah.
seem to be hanging out on Instagram endlessly, and I with self-destructing content, and I understand your model better than I understand the Instagram.
Yeah, I struggled on Instagram. Like I mean, I built a good audience there back in the day, but I just don't really take photos of myself, and I found that that worked a lot better for most Instagram platforms, and I wasn't really creative enough to figure out something that didn't work that could still build me a brand. So I just kind of like axed the idea of Instagram. And you know, now I'm trying to put myself as a face to the brand a little bit more. And my business partner will always just be like, it's so awkward taking a photo of you because it's like we're watching some movie recently. It was like Will Ferrell going, "What am I supposed to do with my hands?" But that's me when you take a photo of me. I don't know what to do. It's really awkward.
Hmm.
So we've stepped now. We have an Instagram for our Armenia account, and
Mhm.
it's just pretty photos of Armenia. Sometimes we'll be in the photo, sometimes not, but it's a mixture of everything. So I find it a lot easier for me to be social on that platform and on the Facebook for those rather than just the blog. But in the other website, the main website that travels anywhere, I just write whatever I write, and it sometimes gets a community of readership, especially around the post-Soviet countries. But then other content is more just for like people that are looking for one-off information for a trip.
Talk about, so you've got broadly, you cover a number of destinations, but the biggest content blocks are certainly Eastern Europe and Caucasus, if you could combine them, and then we'll say the Nordics and Scandinavia. So talk about the different travelers and audience you see for those regions.
Yeah, so for the Scandinavia, it's more of a traveler that has money to spend, of course, and it might be one of their first experiences traveling, so they're more willing to book tours. They're coming for a certain exact experiment or experience, like the Northern Lights or something like that. So I find those travelers they need a little bit more handholding. They'll listen to exactly what you say to do, for the most part, and it's fun. It's a fun reader to cater to, but it also doesn't really build a community. They go, they have their trip, and then they don't really come back to your blog very often. On the contrary, the post-Soviet stuff is where you build up a community. The people that are interested in those regions and those cities and parts of the world, they tend to follow you because they're intrigued by something that's a little bit lesser known. So that's
Mm.
where they tend to be more budget savvy or like mid-range. And they'll listen to you to an extent for how to do things, but then they do it their own way. They have their own method of traveling. I'm not a backpacker anymore. I'm a bit too old for it, for me at least. So I tend to be more a mid-range traveler anyway. But you know, I'll get budget travelers still coming to me. I'll get luxury travelers who end up in the region still will ask me questions. So it's actually a really interesting thing because it actually initiates a lot of conversations, and it's an interesting networking opportunity when people are they reach out to you and they're like, oh, you know, why were you in Karaganda, Kazakhstan? And it's kind of like this conversation starter. And then you end up kind of meeting people like that. So a lot of people that I've met on the road are people that I've actually kind of met online somehow years before because they followed my blog or this or that, and then we ended up in the same area at some point traveling too. So it's I'm sure a lot of people that are listening to this have that are bloggers or that do talk to people about the destinations they go to have encountered something quite similar. It's kind of like a little community.
Hmm. And one of our earlier guests, Mara Pages, she said it's
Yeah.
blogging is such an odd vocation and that it's perfectly socially acceptable to pry into how people make money and how much
Yeah,
money they
yeah.
make. So
Yeah.
let's talk about some of the different, we call them revenue streams, but the different ways that you actually can make money because the destinations you're writing about are they're not Paris, they're not Thailand
Yeah.
beaches,
Yeah.
they're the type of places that are of interest to people in this group, but we're somewhat of a niche audience.
Yeah. Well, Mars sensational at diversifying and finding ways to make money. I'm unfortunately not quite as good at it. I have the ideas in my head. It's just sometimes the implementation is a bit poor. So when you write about those regions, obviously, if I can just say Scandinavia right now makes money on its own. You sell tours there, you sell a hotel, and you get heaps of commission from it. It's very easy. And then if you have ads on your website, that also makes a lot of money from that region. When it comes to monetizing post-Soviet countries, it's a bit more challenging. But you have to look at it from a kind of an investment standpoint. So if I decide to write a lot of content about Almaty, Kazakhstan back in 2012 or 2013, whenever I first went there, nobody had written about this place. And so therefore, anybody that searches the internet is going to stumble upon my content. And therefore, I become an authority on it. So you can get paid speaking engagements. People will come at you to write freelance articles about these places because they don't know who else to go to. I mean, it was really funny. I was just actually on my Facebook memories yesterday, and a couple years ago, I think it was 2014, I helped work with a travel channel show about alcohol here in Armenia. So they found me on my blog. They didn't know who else had written about Armenia. They saw that, oh, she likes to drink and she likes Armenia. Let's contact her. So I actually ended up getting money from doing that, and I helped plan the itineraries for the show that was actually coming here. So a lot of the opportunities I've had over the years that have come out of this region have been a little bit more obscure. And I mean, there's been like, yeah, it's mostly freelance here and there that's come. But you have to also consider if somebody's researching something in a city that you're a high authority on with little competition, say there's a big event in Kazakhstan and they will stumble upon my blog and I'll get nailed with traffic, and that gives you ad money for that day. So if you become an authority on a certain area and it's lesser known, then you can actually make quite a bit of money from the affiliates there, even if it's smaller increments, the ads, and then a lot of like paid opportunities to the side.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
And as a very basic intro to people, you mentioned affiliates. What is that concept for the aspiring bloggers out there?
Yeah, so it's basically just you sell something. In our case, we only really work with like hotels and tours, and then like pickup or not pickups. Yeah, pick like hotel. Sorry, airport pickups, things like that. Those are our main sources. Then like visas and stuff, but we haven't really implemented visas the way we're about to implement them. But basically, you sell something, you get a commission for it. So our top affiliate, bar none, are tours, and it tends to be Scandinavia for the most part. That's where we make our highest commission. But you can do them anywhere. So our goal, actually, there's a lot of tours here in Armenia, and we're working with some tour aggregators as well as actually some of the people here. We're going to be working directly with them to offer affiliates. So, you know, we have a lot going on here in Armenia that people don't know about. There's zip lining, whitewater rafting, like paragliding. All of these things exist here, canyoning, but nobody really knows about it from an international standpoint. So we're hoping to help market them, and then we'll get a commission from any of the bookings that come through as well.
Fantastic. And I see so much advice about how to work with a hotel or how to work with a destination, and it generally seems like pretty either general or terrible advice. So You mentioned a hotel in Tbilisi that wouldn't deal with you because of a post 5 years ago, but it sounds like you've
Yeah.
had many hotels and those that embrace you. So what's the, not we're not the Instagrammer. I have these followers, and I'll take a shot at your pool. Give me free stays. I mean, it sounds like you're having proper business relationships. So what's a way to do it in a productive long term way with destinations and hotels?
Yeah, it's I mean, to be honest, I'm really bad at this because I've always like I value my time sometimes more than the what I would get out of the actually the staying comped somewhere. So my time of having to write about the place or owe them content. Um I mean, I work with hotels and stuff in like Scandinavia, places that really aren't necessarily pining for tourism per se. But here in
Mhm.
Armenia and the Caucasus, we don't really necessarily work with. We stay at guest houses, like family run guest houses, and we usually just pay. So
Mhm.
it's I think it's just what your preference is. For us, it's like we know the value that us staying in this guest house can do for a family, so we usually opt to pay unless they are inviting us there specifically. We don't do outreach here for the most part to places that are small, like independent businesses. But if it's like a bigger place, then yeah, it would be no problem. But we haven't really gone that route yet. We're going to. But with the main website, I've worked with hotels all over the world, and yeah, I mean, you just have to figure out what works for you. For me, I've kind of learned over the years that I'd rather just pay for that stay than have to owe them a post about another hotel post later on.
Mhm.
So I tend to pay my way traveling for the most part. I don't really take a whole lot. I do a couple press trips here and there, but very infrequently these days.
Does I've never taken a press trip. It's not
Yeah.
been of an interest to me, and I don't have
Yeah.
that model. But it does seem like, as you said, it just seems like a huge amount of work and expectation that if you can afford it, in many cases, just pay for
Well, I think
the
for
hotel.
me, it's a business decision. So like if I'm
Mm.
traveling in the Nordics or Scandinavia, it's really expensive for those tours and those hotels. So I would probably try to reach out for a partnership there. But luckily, all of the tourism boards and the tourism people there, for the most part, know me because I've worked with them so many times over the last decade. So they usually can get things squared away. Like we were writing a book last year, a guidebook in northern Norway in the Arctic, and all of that was cooperated with the tourism boards there. But when it comes to like places like here, if it's like a $30 tour, generally speaking, unless they come to me saying I would love for you to do this, it'll be comped. You don't have to write about it. We just want you to experience it and see if you like it. You can sell it. For the most part, we'll just pay for stuff just so we have the experience and we support the small business. But we're also very aware of who the small businesses are and where our money is going and if it's going in the right hands or not anyway. So
Excellent. And when we were chatting before, you made a comment that interested me of feeling anxiety about new destinations, and I think
yeah.
it can be almost daunting for new travelers. And this group has an ethos of being advanced travelers, and I've not wanted that. I've called it serious travelers because I felt like if somebody hasn't even been to one foreign country yet for them, they're planning their trip, but they have a deep interest and want something beyond the TripAdvisor top 10, the zip
Yeah.
lining and those, that I want them to feel welcome here. But you see all these, you see people commenting on social media, it's so easy, I did this, I did that, when it's not always easy, and we all
No.
have our different feelings and concerns. So if you could talk about how you deal with that.
Yeah, I mean, the older I get, the harder it actually is. So I was a bit more fearless when I was younger, a bit more adventurous. But now, I mean, gosh, like I'm claustrophobic. I'm a bit scared of heights. Like I'm scared of vomit. So all these little things, like they just play into my traveling as I get older, and I'm definitely not the most adventurous traveler. So I've kind of gone backwards with it. So I tend to go to the places that are familiar and places I feel comfortable at. So I've been stuck on, I think it's like country 97 or 98. I've been stuck at that country for like 2 years. I just don't go anywhere new. I'm going to start going places new. It's just that I'm running around. I'm, running two websites as a business, and most of my travels are business oriented. So, for me, if I end up in Kamchatka, Russia, okay, I've already been to Russia before, but that's so exciting for me versus going to a country in a region of the world that I've never been to. So I think for me, I tend to focus more on the entire place. I want to, like, here in Armenia, I want to go everywhere in Armenia. In Georgia, to the north, I would like to see everywhere in Georgia, rather than maybe going somewhere that is completely brand new for me. So I'm hoping next year to try to, like, say, okay, maybe 3 new countries a year, 3 new places that I've never been, and see what happens. But I just get anxious. I don't like planning. I'm not much of a planner. So the fact of having to plan before the trip, or even when I get to the destination, is daunting for me. So I just struggle, and I just go back to Kiev or back to Almaty or come here to Yerevan. Yeah, that's kind of what I do.
You mentioned Kiev. I believe that's your favorite city in the world. I've heard you
Yes,
say.
it is. I keep every time I go there, I'm like, oh, this is gonna be the time that's gonna knock it down a notch. It never does. I love it. I just find it very energizing, and um, I mean, the only little complaint I have is I don't really love Ukrainian food, but I mean, I can deal with that because it's international and you can find everything there nowadays. But I love it there. It's a really cool place.
And I mean, what is it that for somebody that hasn't visited, why is it, we're outside the region, it's easy to lump together like, oh, they're all former Soviet territories
Yeah.
or something when they're incredibly diverse places. I just saw John Luca, who did an interview with us last week, in his Facebook group about Soviet travel. He just posted it was like the 1978 commemoration of Lenin singing
Yeah.
the Internationale, but the amount of diverse faces there, it's not like all the same looking person. You have this huge swath of the earth territories that are all very distinct. When I visited Kiev, I felt like of any place that was Russian speaking or broadly Soviet orbit, that seemed like the people seemed like the most carefree
Yeah.
and almost bouncy or joyful, and that's not what I think of the region. But to encapsulate what Kiev means to you.
I think for me, it's probably a lot different than what it might mean for somebody else. So I think my first trip there was 2010 or 11, and it was in the winter, and it was long before Maidan, and the vibe there was just different. So I think over the years, I've been able to watch Kiev kind of grow up and come to its own. And it didn't really have a lot of identity back then, compared to what it has now. Nowadays, I mean, like, you go there, it's just energetic. You see a lot of foreigners there. That didn't exist when I was first there. So I think for me, it has a special place in my heart because I saw it grow with everything that had happened to it. And I've made tons of friends there over the years. I've traveled all across eastern Ukraine, with the exception of Donbass. And I've been to all these other cities, and every time I come back to Kiev, it just feels like home. It feels comfortable to me. I know the city really well. I don't know. I just absolutely love it. I know the outskirts of the city, not just the city center, and it just feels like home. But I've never lived there. So I always end up back there, and I always somehow end up with Ukrainian Airlines, even though every time I fly with them, I swear it's the last time. But somehow it puts me in Kiev, and then I end up there for a couple days. So yeah, but I really like it. So if anybody hasn't been to Kiev yet, I mean, I know there's a lot of more off the path, interesting places in Ukraine, but there's just something really cool about Kiev, like the art scene, the hip culture nowadays. It's really coming into its own. It's a really great city.
Do you go back to the U.S. at all?
Rarely. I actually, so my parents live in Virginia, and my sisters one lives in St. Louis, the other lives in State College, Pennsylvania. And my grandparents lived outside of Pittsburgh in the Ohio Valley.
Mm.
But all of my grandparents are now deceased, as of this year, basically. So I was supposed to go in March, and the coronavirus screwed it up. So I don't know when I'm gonna go back, but everybody's now all over the place. My one sister in St. Louis is moving to Virginia Beach, so I don't know, like, when I'm gonna be back. And I try to go at least every year, but it's now, the last time I was there was Thanksgiving 2018, I think. Uh, yeah, I mean, my parents, they're really supportive of what I do, and they don't push me to come home. So, we keep in touch really well, and they like seeing me when they see me, but they understand like what I do, and they're really supportive.
Yeah, that's fantastic to
Yeah.
hear. And it's been a decade since I was an expat for a decade in
Yeah.
China, and I'm
Yeah.
really itching to spend more. I love where we're in Seattle right now, and I love it, but
Yeah.
I'm itching to be somewhere else, or I
Yeah.
wouldn't be able to decide. I've got a very long list. But we'll close with two of speaking from an American perspective, and or
Yeah.
maybe even broadly international. A lot of Europe's islands are probably not as well known as tourist
Mhm.
destinations, and your posts on we'll start with Canary Islands. I visited. I was totally surprised. I knew nothing about these places other than they were on a lot of the country collecting lists.
Yeah. Yeah, there I avoided going there for so many years because it's what in like I think Scandinavia they call it, or maybe it's just in Norway, Seden. I'm not sure if I'm even like I don't even know if that's really like what they call it or just the people I hung out with called it that. It means like
Mm-hmm.
the South. It's packaged tourism. So I
Mm-hmm.
always avoided going there because I just thought it was going to be like these TV shows that I see about like Magaluf or places like that. And I booked a trip to go to Lanzarote and Fuerteventura. Lanzarote was pretty much that, except I think I was about 60 years younger than almost everybody that was actually on these trips. It was great though. It was stunning scenery. I was blown away. But then I got to Fuerteventura and I just fell in love with it. I couldn't believe that I had put off going to these islands for so long for the fear of it just being like Indian curry houses, which actually now I would give anything for one of those right now. But I did put it off for so many years, and it's a really special place. And I think every island is completely different from what I understand. And I have the next couple on my list to go to as soon as things clear up a little bit. But I want to go see them all now. I'm addicted, I think.
Fantastic. And the Azores.
Yeah, now that is, if anybody is watching this and you have not been there, try to go as soon as you can. It is going to be booming with tourism at some point soon, I can assure you. It is absolutely insanely beautiful. It's got such great culture, great food, great scenery, just everything about the Azores is just absolutely sensational. I don't know if I've ever come across anywhere that just blew me away as much as that place did because I didn't think to expect that. I knew it was going to be pretty, but I didn't think to expect that. Unlike the Faroe Islands, which I already knew was going to be beautiful. But yeah, I mean, I only actually got to see São Miguel when
Mm,
I was there, and I just was blown away. It was magical.
fantastic. Well, you've given us many places to dream, as well as thank you for the insight on your travels and business.
Yeah, thank you very much. I really appreciate you guys having me. It's almost midnight here, so I'm hoping I didn't say anything
Uh,
stupid.
no, fantastic. Thank you for joining us. Wonderful evening. Have a good night, Megan. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everybody.
Thanks, everybody.